I started posting web design about 2 years ago, and since then I've gained 100,000 followers across platforms, but more importantly, hundreds of sales calls and dozens of projects actually came through. And I work with brands making $1 to $15 million a year, either selling elevated clothing to healthcare services. My average project is $20,000 to $50,000, covering design and front-end development, because I didn't just learn web design, I've learned how to build a design system that supports multiple channels brands can post on. But from selling the project to branding and launching a website, I'm going to show the process I followed on a recent project with Hours. My name is Blaze. I run a studio called Shovel. Let's get into this. Hours is an elevated basics brand. Their core products are blanks like hoodies and sweatpants, but they also heavily promote other collections that essentially layer on top of the blanks. I spent the first year creating and positioning Shovel's portfolio. While I did take on anything possible to gain experience, towards the end of year one, I was only talking to the top 1% of leads. These are people with a budget range to create the best in class work. My content was highly around pain points of clients, mostly fashion and Shopify, since I have a strong personal tie to these. And videos about cultural topics really show I'm in the same circle. So what did the founder want from me? Roman built the brand from scratch. He wants to level up from where he was in the last 3 years and to get away from the stereotypical Instagram brand where a concrete lay flat is the first touch point for many customers. Today, Hours nails the quality of their content, not just for organic, but ads and email too. When they hit me up, they also had an app being made, which is very convenient. What makes these channels feel consistent with design is a design system, which is essentially guidelines for how the UI looks. But to elevate a design system, good taste and core brand styles go a long way. None of these were mapped out. This is a small, nimble team that thinks about the content first. So having Shovel implement these two things truly takes a brand from DIY to professional level. Exactly what Shovel solves, and before any visuals are made, you need strategy. That's a trend word, but what does it mean to me? In this context, breaking down their Shopify metrics is a starting point. We want to understand what products are selling and why they're selling. And we easily saw that hoodies and sweatpants are by far hero SKUs. It's very common for mid-level brands to have one or two of these products really outperform the others. Seeing what pages get the most views also gives context. Between this and product sales, you can start to draft a sitemap, which is essentially how pages of a website connect. I used to scope this out before a project started, but for e-commerce, there's a general architecture Shopify will support. Ours is also really proactive on customer feedback. Between answering DMs and capturing post-purchase surveys, we know exactly why people are shopping. I'm not affiliated, but they use a Shopify app called Faring to get that post-purchase data. And they had no incentives like discounts in place, so they might have gotten a smaller sample size than they could have, but at least the data was likely not quickly entered. But to sum up those results, sizing, material, and good reviews were most important to the people buying. We also learned that a lot of parents were buying for their kids. The audience was generally like 18 and younger. And generally, clothing brands use that type of content on product pages. With CPG type brands, there's different content customers want to see, and you can actually find that content from running meta ads or having those post-purchase surveys. But Ours is offering more than hoodies and sweatpants. There's 4 distinct collections: blanks, signature, graphics, and accessories. This is another reoccurring problem I see. Multiple product lines either feel too distinct or not distinct enough. Mainstream brands even struggle with this. This is where I hired a talented brand designer, which is another plus of having a social audience, mostly designers and developers. You can find good talent fast. At the core of a good brand, let's keep it simple. There's 4 things: a good logo, a nicely curated set of fonts, a nicely curated set of colors, and well-directed photography. In a good setting, these are different from industry competition, have cultural resonance with the brand's history, and also fit into the context they're displayed in. Let me explain. Ours has more than one logo. The core wordmark you see on products is easy to understand and very neutral. The signature icon feels a little more editorial and only lives in the context of the signature collection. There's also a graphics and accessories collection that didn't have anything. We needed to solve this. Me and my designer Marcus made these sick concepts. A lot of potential for motion application, but more importantly, that core wordmark is always assigned with the collection. Now, colors and fonts are fun. We can pick fonts all day, but the ones that we picked had 2 things: flexibility and weights for us to use in many different layouts, and also a cool history. National was inspired by Helvetica, used in NYC subways. Ours has a ton of streetwear influence in NYC, a stretch, but sells the font well. Untitled serif is described as quotidian, meaning everyday, daily, unremarkable by design. Ours is positioned exactly here. And this is just fluff. A sans and a serif generally work really well together. Colors were pulled from aesthetics we found. Gen X Soft Club. Internet blue is completely reminiscent of early day interfaces. These are things that everyone involved in the project grew up on. So I'm just showing you the winners here. We actually created in-depth brand concepts to present these choices. Each touch on distinct digital and physical layouts. layouts, but more importantly have UI concepts Hours could choose from. Marcus, the designer, killed these. We liked every single one. And we all liked this one, but since Roman has other brands, he might actually use this editorial layout for another one. I'll keep this point quick. I don't shoot photography myself, but I have a valid opinion on how it should look for e-commerce. There's a few clients I actually won't show in my portfolio due to iPhone and AI photos being used. In web design, it completely drives the visual of the layout you make. I always throw in this photography brief for my clients to reference. You can just use my file for free. I'm not even asking for your email here. More importantly, this was digestible for the creative director to follow. He did a masterful job at the final assets we used when we launched the site. Now we have some core brand styles finished. Let's start to scribble. These are called low fidelity wireframes. I personally think mid fidelity views are a waste of time. The goal is to show how content is organized, and you want to be fast and scrappy doing this. So referencing the customer data at the beginning of the project, we should probably have those elements at the top of the website. You realistically get 1 to 2 scrolls from a user max. Since this is an e-com store, sales data or any new campaigns being promoted will tell us what lives on the homepage. And an interesting insight I learned from the Fear of God team is that all product lines should be on the homepage. They saw a direct revenue loss when one was taken off. So in the context of Hours, we want all 4 collections somewhere on this page. The blanks and signature collection are by far the best performing. This is where we actually see web design iterations. All of the work we did previously is mandatory to have best in class work here. We design each page essential to Shopify, key pages being home, collection, and product. But you want to account for general pages in between. These will vary per brand. Ours has a blog they post on quite often. They also have a VIP program that really needs to communicate a specific set of content for the really engaged customers. And then they have wholesale and influencer pages as well, which are basically forms. Me and Marcus approach this in an interesting way. He's very visual brained while I'm very conversion brained. So we both drafted our own versions of the pages, and you can combine ideas from there. And also we give Hours 3 business days to make Figma comments, and we can iterate on this 3 times. While we made these screens, Roman was constantly spitting out great insights from his past experience with A/B testing. So let me explain some of these choices we made here. The cart overlay is a key element to the checkout flow on an e-commerce website. Free shipping after a certain spend is a very common UX pattern. For Hours, it didn't really change anything. There was no order value increase. What was more effective for that was having a free item after a certain spend. Offering a carabiner does increase average order value. And I designed this cart to specifically support both. It's essentially a stepper that incentivizes you to add more. After you hit free shipping, the free item bar appears. This is mapped out in a very particular way for the developer to reference. You also need to design what this looks like when a free item is added. Another crazy insight in the cart overlay is shipping protection. Technically, Hours was out of compliance with this by having it automatically toggled in cart, but shipping protection as a product was a number 7 bestseller, probably because most people missed that it was being added in, which another insight from Fear of God is that they ran into the same problem. They're so big, they don't want to mess with lawsuits, so it lives at the end of checkout unchecked. Ours is a lot smaller than that, so they're kind of living on the edge. They wanted it in the cart overlay unchecked this time. More insights are that upselling items increased order value again. Ours has a core offer, buy 3 blanks, get 30% off. So after you add a blank to cart, it's only natural to add another one. There's a lot of logic I kind of thought into of a post item overlay. You'll see this a lot in like On Running's website. The goal is to make these salesy design elements look branded, and that's what we do best at Shovel. You can see how they fit into the design system nicely. My last insight is that quick add to cart buttons do increase add to cart rates, and Ours have the data to prove this. The issue is that when the item has multiple variants on mobile, you need to have a compact solution to fit all those variants, and this is how I designed around that block. It actually felt quite natural in the final build. This is a core step of the project. A design system sets guidelines for how the UI looks. And where does UI apply? Websites, emails, apps, product UI, social media, packaging, internal documents. There's endless use cases for a design system, and it not only applies to UI, it actually applies to a lot of branding too. For Shovel, I've been able to template this to a point where we can highly customize it. This is just a Figma file. And when those screen iterations are final, again, we go through 3 iterations of that. We can finalize the styles in a design system. So we fed the brand variables in here. For example, the color palette in the UI is extended, meaning that there's light and dark shades needed for hover and active states. You also also need to be aware of contrasting to meet WCAG standards. Accessibility lawsuits are real. E-commerce and hospitality are the top targets because of the functionality needed in those websites. Always need to have WCAG A standards at the minimum. I've set variables in type as well. A little more nitpicky with letter spacing and line height, but the best designers put a lot of thought into this. Type scales need to be easily readable, and you can't just go below 12 pixels in font sizes. Again, another WCAG thing. A good icon set is essential to best-in-class web design. Google Symbols is very flexible in weights and open source, but lately I've really enjoyed native keyboard symbols. It really speaks to the internet web 1.0 era, which is a very big aesthetic we chase with this project. Also just very easy to implement from a dev and design POV. Then Tailwind is a major CSS framework to develop this. Claude Code is really fast with this, and I prefer this even when I develop by hand just for the speed. We pull spacing and elevation styles to match what Tailwind is defaulting to. And if we want, you have the ability to edit these. In this particular project, I found it to work well. So now these brand choices then apply to components. This is an atomic design system. So think of brand styles as an atom. Multiple atoms make molecules. Multiple molecules make organisms. Multiple organisms make patterns. So brand styles move into core components. Those core components move into higher level components. And then those move into screen mockups. The button is probably the easiest component to show. There could be dozens of variations. It's really important to have hover, active, and keyboard focus states to meet the accessibility. There's also primary, secondary, tertiary styles, and those are some things that help determine hierarchy. Product cards are specific to e-commerce. These link to product pages, and good ones will allow you to quick add. So the same states as the button, but you also need a sale and sold out version as well. Mobile view specifically needs to account for a quick add with multiple variants again, and I showed that interaction before. The system is pretty detailed. The most important thing is that it's sizable for a freelancer to small in-house design team. I formerly had a corporate role in design systems, and it can get as deep as you want. You could have dedicated teams on this for a whole year. For shovel clients, that level is not worth the spend. I work at the point of not wanting to use a prepaid template for your website, but also I want to follow a procedure that actually gives you a fully customized design. Shovel's design system is an in-house tool you can find on my email list, and it's the one thing I'm going to promote to designers and developers because we actually use it. So we didn't develop the website this time, but we spent a lot of time QAing and mapping the new campaign content for launch. Ours has an overseas developer, so there was a language barrier challenge. This is a process that's very back and forth, and shout out to Jesus for being quick on these updates. You can see how I visually lay things out in Figma versus just making bullet point notes. It does take more time to set up, but helps with that communication barrier. And back to the topic of content, making sure you can supplement just a homepage takes a huge effort. So there's got to be some coordination and some file system sharing. We use Google Drive in this case. And looking back at it, the main issue was having content that lived in landscape ratios to fit the full width sections better. But that's something Ours can just adjust to and we've learned from over time. You can't tell, I did some AI expanding here, and that only works well when the background is a solid color. Typically avoid that and really don't let AI touch the product. I don't think that's a good look. Here's the final cut of the website, and let me show you some of my favorite details. We decided that horizontal scroll was a little more immersive on desktop, despite it being less common and conversion minded. Dragging images to me feels quite intuitive. Most people will scan this left to right, so we started with lay flats that go into model shots. Since Afterpay does a lot of sales for them, we needed to have that design be compliant, which basically means following the Afterpay brand guidelines. It's very nitpicky, but I think the font size had to be 80% of the price's font size and also visually placed below it. What I really enjoy is the ability to collect emails on sold out products, but also size guide tables looked really clean with these individual cell underlines, and the product imagery with model sizes to supplement it works so well. Ours is actually a dream client when it comes to content, because usually that's what limits a good size guide. And I think this horizontal scroll really saves on vertical space so you can see the important content below. I also spent a lot of time on the submenus. This is a Microsoft Excel inspired layout, quite easy to scan. I added this cool gradient fade to kind of transition into blogs or any featured content they want to show. And the dedicated collection pages are a lot more curated. They actually use a different templates because they use a hero section and show some BTS scroll content. Ideally, I want to have the shop grid above the fold, but I think this is really cool visually. If you guys want to check out that site, it's hourscollection.com, and let me know if you find any bugs. This is one of the first projects we've launched this year in 2026. And this site really reflects where Hours is at now in terms of design style and taste, but also Shovel too. Really happy with how this turned out. If you guys want to see more projects like this, subscribe.